Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about plans in the Queen's Gambit Declined Exchange Variation. This is going to be the first video of a three-part series whereby I use games to illustrate three of the most common plans in the Queen's Gambit Declined Variation. So for you newbies out there, this is what the Queen's Gambit Declined variation looks like. So here we have a Queen's Gambit decline, and we exchange on d5 with the white pieces. So this is an opening dictated by white, of course. Then after the pawn is recaptured, bishop g5. All right, and this opening can be played very slow and positionally, or it can be played in an aggressive manner. So I'm going to briefly show you what the three major plans looks like, and then we're going to go over one game that is illustrative of one of the plans. So for example, one of white's major plans here is to play the move e3, f3, bishop d3, knight g2, castle, rook ae1. So I'll just show you what that looks like. Notice how the f pawn is not blocked in this position, and white's major plan here is to make the pawn advance e4, and usually white will take on the hanging pawns. The hanging pawns allow dynamic possibilities for white, and he usually wants to advance black's pieces away from the protection of the king side. And as you can see in this position, white is loading up on the king side for an attack, and that is one of the major plans in the position. So that's plan number one. So now I'll show you the second plan that we will be discussing. Takes place when after the exchange, white plays even more aggressively. Now notice in the first example, white castled on the king side. Here white implements a similar plan where he doesn't block the f pawn, right? So he has the same idea of advancing with f3, but he castles on the queen side. And as you can see with this opposite side castling, the game becomes even more imbalanced. And this provides a lot of opportunities for both players. All right, game gets very sharp here. So as you can see, there's plenty of opportunities in this opening that seems, has its reputation of being quiet. It's basically up to you, and how far you're willing to go. You don't have to castle symmetrically in this variation, but you can go for the opposite wing castling and go for the jugular, and play as if you're playing a Sicilian defense. Of course you're taking more chances, but that's what you have to do for glory sometimes, is you have to be willing to take chances. So that's plan number two. Now, this third plan is what I consider the most played plan out of them all, and this is like the classical approach here. So after, again, the exchange, white will simply just develop his knight to its natural square on f3, and castle on the king side, and the position is pretty much symmetrical, except that you can see white has a pawn preponderance in the center of the board, and white's plan is basically to create a weak pawn on the C file for black. And the way he usually does that is by playing this classical plan of b4-b5, exchanging on c6. And what that does in essence is change the base of the pawn chain from b7. Right after the exchange, the base of the pawn chain is now c6, whereby utilizing the open c file, white bears down on the c file and on that pawn. Okay, and usually with black trying to defend this pawn, of course, the stress in the position creates weaknesses and opportunities elsewhere. Another point of note is the dark squares. All right, usually this is a nice spot, especially after this pawn is no longer here to be able to play to b6 after it's been exchanged. This square can often become problematic as well as this square also. Of course, conversely, black will be trying to play on this side of the board, also on the king side. All right. So with that, let's go into our first game. So this would be considered the third plan. So again, this is the first video of a three-part series where I discuss these plans. So first, we're going to look at this game from 1936 between Sammy Reshevsky with the white pieces and George Trisman with the black pieces. So d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, c takes, e takes, bishop g5, knight bd7, e3, and again, just for you newbies out there, after knight bd7, there is no gain of material here at all. Sorry about that. Even in such a quiet opening, there are still traps, and this right here, black, lays a trap. So for example, if knight takes d5, trying to exploit the pin of the bishop on g5, black has a surprise. Black just simply takes and gives up the queen here. Knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, bishop b4 check, and as you can see, the king has nowhere to go. So queen d2, entering right into the pin, and then this gives white just the time to just pick up the extra piece here, and he just simply plays king takes d8, and then after that, of course, you pick up the queen. So that's a trap right there that black will try to do from time to time. The game continued e3. Of course, Reshevsky did not fall into it, and now bishop e7, okay, because the pawn is legitimately threatened. Queen to c2, c6, bishop d3, castles, knight f3, rook e8. So generally in these type of positions, black will try to play on the king side. Imagine if there was a pawn here, right? The pawns will be pointing toward the king side, and so that dictates the general direction, you know, the where the pawn chain is pointing over towards the king side dictates the general play where you should be directing your activity. So black normally in these positions will be playing for a king side attack, and white will be playing on the queen side. h3, knight f8, bishop f4, and now bishop d6. Trade takes place. Castles, bishop e6, and rook f to b1. So now we see the beginning of this plan that I spoke about of b4, b5. So let's see what Reshevsky does here. b4, rook c7, and of course black anticipates this also. Queen d2, just getting the queen off of this the same file as the rook in case things open up. Queen d7. I'm sorry, queen e7, queen to c2. Knight drops back to e8, and the idea is to come to d6. a4, knight d6. Rook to c1 now. Rook ac8. The queen moves again. Knight g6. And now Reshevsky plays b5 here. Now here, Trisman makes a mistake and plays the move queen f6. Now, I had already explained to you what white's plan was in this position, which was to create his backward pawn on c6. Okay, so what black should have played here to avoid that is c5. However, then he would have an isolated pawn, but he would fare better because he would have some dynamic chances with that pawn. So play could go rook takes c5, and of course white would be open to all trades. Knight after knight e2, knight c4, and as you can see, even though black has an isolated pawn, he's pretty active. And of course, that's how you have to be when you have static weaknesses in the position. So queen b1, for example, queen f6, and as you can see, to compensate for his pawn structure deficit, so to speak, black's pieces are very active and healthily placed. It's understandable to see why tradesmen didn't want to accept the isolated pawn, however, maybe not seeing enough prospects down the road and figured that he would just get ground down in some type of ending. However, after queen takes f6, Reshevsky continued with his plan, and now we have the pawn base shifted now to c6. Bishop a6, weakening the coordination of the rooks. The rook moves, and now knight b5. Again, tactics are king in these positions. Notice that the rook is now hanging, and so this move is not available. Okay, and now this provokes black to trade pieces. So knight takes, a takes, and again with this pawn weakness, the trades of heavy pieces favor favor white here. Rook b8 trying to exploit the pin. Notice also how this bishop on a6 is anchoring this pawn. So white is definitely exploiting the fact of the lack of coordination in the black position here. Queen a3, and this pawn is in trouble. It's a fixed target. It can't advance, right? It can't capture because of the rook. It's just in a bad way. Bishop f5, and now Reshevsky continues on with the plan of attacking the new weakness created on c6. This is a classical example of this plan in the exchange variation at work. Dangerous plan. Queen d6, and now queen a5. Again, exploiting the fact that this rook is not really adequately protected. You can't really capture here. Right? If he tries to capture, the rook will be captured. He just drops a piece. So this is why the queen moved to a5. Now you will have this double attack here. So now bishop e6. So we see some shuffling going on by black. And now rook ac1. So more pressure on the fixed target. Rook b6. And now finally the capture is made. B takes c6. Rook b takes c6. And now an inconvenient reality for black here. Powerful move, bishop b7. It's killer. The rook can't capture because the rook on c6 would just get captured with the tempi on the queen. Also notice too the benefits of the move h3 earlier. White always has an escape if there's a check down there at the bottom on the first rank. So bishop b7 was played. Rook takes. D takes, creating a clear pass pawn, and now queen e7. So notice here, black has material equality, all right, but the position is not equal. Okay, white is winning this position. That bishop being so powerful, plus with the addition of that pass pawn, gives white the upper hand. Not only does he have that, but Black is stuck with this isolated pawn. This pawn is about to fall, and Black's position is just melting like butter. C6, bishop c8, bishop takes c8, rook takes c8, and just snatch the pawn. Queen d5. Okay, just basically robbery in broad daylight. Queen e6, and Reshevsky plays queen c5, attacking the a pawn, and of course he could have traded queens there, but he didn't want to. Rook c7, knight d4, queen e7, and knight b5. Just beautiful, display of tactics and positional ability by Reshevsky. And after knight b5, George Tresman resigned. There's nothing to do after queen takes c5, rook takes c5, or rook c8, c7. It's pretty much all over at this point. So that is part one, again, of that of our series that we're going to start on the plans in the Queen's Gambit Decline exchange variation. So what can we take from that video, from that game, is that it's a dangerous plan. It's a quiet and dangerous plan. So now you know the at least one plan, and I suggest you try it out in your games. And perhaps after I show the white side, then maybe I'll make a video on the black side and how over the years black has came up with different ideas in order to counter white's different plans in the position, because that's what it is. That's how you come up with these different plans, is that you have a strong plan, and then somebody comes up with an antidote for it, and then somebody comes up with another plan, and goes back and forth, and now 100 years later we have all these different plans from both sides to implement. So what can we take from that game is definitely a dangerous plan. It's b4-b5, exchanging on c6, and then piling pressure on the c6 pawn, and also on the dark squares in the position. So it's not it's a quiet and low risk also. And this is one of the reasons why you don't see the Queen's Gambit declined play from the black side too much. It's not that it's a bad opening, it's very solid, but it's kind of akin to the Ruy Lopez, as far as the Spanish torture is concerned. It's kind of like you're slightly worse for a very long time without a lot of counter chances and opportunities. And this is why you see the black players adopting for more dynamic openings, like the King's Indian Defense, Grunfeld, Nimzo Indians, etc. Because they want more, even Benoni's and stuff like that. They want more balance. Imbalances in the position where they have a chance to strike back, instead of just being slowly ground down by a strong opponent with a simple and clear plan. So anyway, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please comment below, subscribe, and like, and spread the videos around. Also, please support my channel and donate. That's a link below, and also check below for DVDs and / books related to this opening. Also, I always post those, some good videos and books if you still read books. So enjoy those. And again, we're talking about the Queen's Gambit Decline exchange variation. So those videos and books will be related to that. And I'll see you guys on the next video.